on for that, who falls in a lot of this line. You kind of agree with a lot of stuff he's doing, but you just don't like some of his statements that he makes and his
Yeah,
bullying. And
that is correct. I think he can be quite uncivil, buffoonish even at times. Um, he's, but by the same token, and would love to be able to equate that boorishness with uninformed intellect or someone who's has no capabilities. But I think it's quite the opposite. I think he's a brilliant strategic thinker, especially when it comes to media and messages. And, so and one of the things he's been able to convey to never Trumpers and other conservatives and Republicans is say, bottom line is I'm on your team. I'm doing, our interests are aligned. You may not like me, but where else will you go? There's no one else who's taking up the mantle of our common causes, even if I do fly off the handle and, I'm a little vulgar sometimes. I'm still your guy. And I think that's what the Never Trumpers are coming to terms with, is that he's accomplishing their aims as well. I mean, does personality matter? And I've said that to you a number of times. If you separate personality and policy, the guy's a conservative.
definitely, he's been. I mean, like you just don't really. I mean, personally, I think he's very much been governing as a conservative, and that's pretty much the only thing that matters. And that's what a lot of these never Trumper people are like. Are really funny because they say like, "Well, we don't like Trump. We wish there was like a really conservative Republican who actually brought back traditional Republican values." And like they point to people like Jeff Flake, but you just don't see him like gaining any votes. Like, where would he?
Right.
Like, he's not going to get any votes from the left. I mean, hopefully not. And he's not going to get any votes really from the right because they're all going to be like hung up with Trump. Like, there is no other real option in America because there is some people, like some like Republican establishment types who have been kind of affronted by Trump, but they mostly live in Washington D.C. or maybe like New York, and they and really nowhere else, and there just isn't that many of them, so they kind of have no other option than, I guess you said, to turn to Trump.
Yeah, and listen, there is nowhere else to go right now. Everyone running in local races, every congressional district, every Senate race, more and more often, they are looking for the president to show up and campaign for them. They never would have done that. If this was even 12 months ago, even 6 months ago, I would say, they wouldn't be looking for that. But let's be honest. I mean, the president is riding a string of victories. The liberals may seethe at what the right is calling victories, but nonetheless, they are victories for
Definitely,
Republicans.
yeah, it's like the Kavanaugh court is like it's pretty much winning. Having Brett Kavanaugh on the court is not only winning like the Supreme Court battle, which is like you're going to have the chance to decide the law in this country for like 30 years, which is like horrifying to me.
Yeah.
You're also like they manage to turn it into such like a cultural thing too, which does one thing. It just gets people excited for it just gets people excited for the Republicans. It gets people excited, like the Republican base is excited. They hate the Democrats even more, and that only matches or comes close to the rage that Democrats feel towards Republicans, which is like at an all-time high at the moment. So
Oh, absolutely.
you just get like it's not anything that we need to have happen. So it's kind of like a two-pronged victory, and it was such a big thing for them. But I mean, I don't really know how much Kavanaugh, like I don't really know how much Trump has to do with Kavanaugh. Like he literally just got the name written down on a piece of paper, sent to him, and he pretty much read it out. And Mitch McConnell, what's his name? John Conrad, Kevin McCarthy. No, not Kevin. I think he's in the House, but they did all the work from there, and that's pretty much it. The good thing is it gets to get chalked off to him and his name, and his supporters are going to credit him to that. And I think another main reason is, while Trump may be like the least popular president in modern history, he's very, very like the most popular president ever with the Republican base, which is like
exactly
probably why they want to have him at every single little rally, like Ted Cruz.
Exactly. Ted Cruz. They hated one another for 2 years. And now, listen, Ted Cruz needs Donald Trump to support him in his race.
Mm-hmm.
Texas is clearly a state that's changing culturally, right? Texas is so it is a microcosm of the rest of the country. But still, to get the base of your support to rally around you. You bring the president in. President's riding on his string of victories, which enough independents also seem to think are okay. And then you were talking about suburban men, and you got suburban white women, and everyone's diced. We dice and slice the electorate, but there's a big middle that is always willing to cross a party line because they're not affiliated with a party. They're affiliated to their pocketbooks and their kids' welfare, and so I believe that Cruz will keep his seat. Ultimately, Texas will be Texas. I could be wrong. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I personally hope he doesn't. But when you said that there's a big middle, I think there's a lot of people, like the economically focused voters, which is like pretty much everyone. Like they are like the Democrats. It's going to be very interesting after the midterms. I think we'll get a full answer on this. Like, what happens to the Democratic message about the economy? Because you're either going to get someone like Kamala Harris, who's pretty much going to run a campaign of A, I hate Trump, B, we should all reunify, and like C, I hate Trump, or you're going to get someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, who's going to be like, all right, here's what I'm going to do about the economy, here's what I'm going to do about healthcare, here's how I'm going to lead this country forward, like foreign policy-wise, and oh yeah, Trump also is very bad, and maybe we should think about getting him out. Like, that's going to be an afterthought. And they're going to go to towns across the country, and they're going to say, yeah, here's what I'm going to do about this, here's what I'm going to do about that. And people, I think, they're going to get behind it much more than they're going to get behind the Republican message. But, like, for a long time, the Republicans have really been the only one offering a, like, coherent national message about that stuff.
I agree 100%. I don't think that pure rage ever elected anyone. If you look at the 60s, and there are some parallels, right? You're looking at Antifa, and I'll use that word. People don't like it. Mobs, directing, dominating an urban center. You can parallel that with the anti-war demonstrations in the 60s. Well, what did that give us? Richard Nixon. So I don't think that rage and what appears to be violent demonstration or counter social demonstrations would yield any great results. And honestly, I do believe that Democrats should start calling Antifa a mob. They'd be doing themselves a favor, because I think most people, when they see windows breaking and cars on fire, they consider that a mob.
Yeah, I think a lot of Antifa gets a lot of play by people like Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, as being like much bigger than it is. Like, it's only like, I think like a few hundred active members, and they're like, then you got people like the Proud Boys, which is, by the way, it's a hilarious name, causing like real violence, beating people up on the streets of New York, and that just shows. And the New York City police does like little to nothing about it. And that just happened like this past weekend. But I think Antifa is, again, it gets a lot of play with like the Republican base. But I just don't think, again, people are really not too worried about that. But I just don't think. I think what Democrats should say is Antifa. Like, we don't condone any violence. Like, no one's going to be like, yeah, violence. But
Right.
What I think their message should be is like, Antifa's violent. That's bad. But Antifa is very small, and the Republicans are trying to make it bigger than it is. And I think that's more the truth.
And that may be true, but the tactic of intimidation in the in urban streets, even if it's a small number, but if that small number shows up everywhere, there's a demonstration, and people were in Portland. People were claiming that, well, it wasn't all Antifa. There were a lot of Black Lives Matters. Well, that is equally as bad for the Democrats and people who support Black Lives Matter, or the core message of Antifa. You gotta call violence what it is. I mean, you just have to do it, even if it's a small number of people. Doesn't matter. This doesn't play well. Again, we were talking about the vast middle who don't care about a party line. This doesn't play well with them. They don't want to see a mob rule. They don't want to see innocent people in their cars being harassed or beaten. It's not a good look.
But like, other than obviously you have the incident of Berkeley, and that's probably the biggest one that happened, like, I think a year ago almost, over Milo Yiannopoulos, and that just seems to be very, like, the incidents of violence, they should be condemned, but they're very few and far between. It's which is the other good thing. Like, I don't think.
But you should condemn them when they happen.
Yes, definitely. So that's all gonna be very interesting. And another question is, you're talking about Antifa, but the question is, what kind of influence is Brett Kavanaugh and the Supreme Court confirmation of him? Like, what do you think? How much of that do you think is going to be influenced in the election? Because, I mean, again, there's polls show that people don't really know that much about Supreme Court justices, but after this big fight where it's been national news for 2 weeks, the only thing anyone's talking about, do you think that's going to change a lot of people's minds?
I can say this from conversations with friends. There isn't a single person who has a kid in high school age or a little older that this didn't give some pause. Whether it was fair or not to characterize it as a he said, she said, or the trashing of due process, it awakened the notion in quite a few people that that you could be plagued forever, especially the age of social media. Again, Brett Kavanaugh didn't have that problem, right? For young transgressions, and especially women who are the mothers of boys, were the ones for whom, even if they're liberal, said, that made me think, like, what could happen to my son? And so I think it touched a nerve, a cultural nerve, not a political one, but one about actual fairness and giving credence to all sides and all stories. And then what is the preponderance of evidence? What is what is guilt beyond a reasonable doubt? And I think these are the issues that it raised in people. And how they shake out in the polls, well, that's a different story. Whether people will just say, oh, yeah,